Each of us as individuals, how we move and what we think matters at this time. We're experiencing a great economic shift in which your creativity is requested. Rama Business School is a 4-day program that teaches you actionable insights and advice on building your online business, yogic technologies to penetrate the online noise and boost your sales, and how to create meeting, interconnection, and possibility in the digital age. Join us for Rama Business School, Prosperity and Velocity in the Digital Age, online May 14th through 17th. Discover more at ramayogainstitute.com/business-school.
I got the great privilege to sit down for a second interview with Barbara Hen Clow as she deepened into her research around all things cosmological and the patterns which are presenting themselves in current events and beyond. It was a deep conversation, and I so respect and value her as a wisdom keeper and an elder on planet Earth, as well as her work off planet. I hope you enjoy this really incredible second interview with Barbara Hen Clow. I am just so incredibly excited about this conversation, the second conversation with you, Barbara Hen Clow. Our episode on Reality Riffing was the most watched, downloaded, and listened to episode we've ever had, and just our community and international response to our first conversation was really incredible. So welcome back.
Thank you, Guru Jagat.
Thank you so much. And
happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I know there's some things that you want to cover. So I'd love to just start kind of, it's been about a month since we talked before. A lot's happened, and would love to just hear what's happening for you.
Well, I think what I kind of want to focus on a little bit is I've been, since I talked to you, deeply thoughtful, and I know everyone has been deeply thoughtful. And I think to center that deep thoughtfulness around the conjunctions of Jupiter conjunct Pluto is probably going to be really useful. The first one was April 4th, and then one's coming up on June 30th. And what I noticed with the early April and April 4th in particular is that people are starting to realize that this whole thing is much, much bigger than coronavirus.
Yeah.
And that actually the economy is probably a much, much bigger issue ultimately than the virus itself.
Yeah.
And so I think the fact that that insight seems to be percolating into our reality at this moment, I think gives us a sense of guidance regarding the astrology, because the astrology this year and around the issues that we're dealing with is truly incredible. I've never seen anything so revealing in my life. And given how difficult this situation is, we got to use everything we can get.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I also feel, I was talking about this morning, I feel that a lot of the fruition of many of the things that have been planted and the seeds that have been planted since 2012 and before are starting to come up, those tools, those skills, those languages, those understandings. So I think on the positive note, it's that there's a growth of kind of the 2012 to 2020 leap. That's the way I'd describe it.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting insight on your part. Just before I got on the phone, an article came to Carl Kalaman, who's so great on the Mayan calendar, just published another article on what might be going on. And it led me to thinking about things since 2012 up until now, at this point, 2020. And the way you put that is really interesting, because I think it focuses us into the fact that what each one of us is doing and thinking about right now is of such critical importance. Because, we're the ones who create the collective field, after all. And so I can't emphasize how much each one of us matters. And that seems to have come to the fore since 2012. Regardless in 2011, regardless of what the media did with the end of the Mayan calendar or anybody else, a whole lot of people, millions and millions of people, realized that something has fundamentally shifted. And I think it's in that awareness of this deep level of change that's going on, I think that's what activates us as individuals.
I mean, these are, definitely Plutonic and Uranus times when you see on mainstream media that something like 40 to 50% of Americans don't believe that the coronavirus is what they're telling us. I mean, that's a major amount.
Yeah, and I think also it's really important to continually focus on the fact that the coronavirus is really not that different than the typical seasonal flu. Now, on the last show, we talked about how the virus was exacerbated and activated more so by the issue of 5G.
Yeah.
And we kind of already covered that. But to go back to that issue of it just being pretty much the same statistics as a normal flu, then why are we having this big program laid on us? I mean, are we going to have everybody getting isolated and quarantined every year in the fall, for example? And are we going to totally gut the global economy because of this crazy idea? In other words, it's like taking away our power at this point, just when we know what to do about the seasonal flu. At least I do. I've always known what to do about the seasonal flu, nothing different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how are you kind of I know that a lot of what many of us are doing is paying attention and looking for through lines through multiple narratives. Tell us, is there anything that has advanced for you around the narratives? Obviously, there's something having to do with the global economy, but any other pieces of this puzzle?
Well, regarding what we normally do ourselves, what I did this year is this flu, even though it's a normal fall winter flu as far as I'm concerned, and then exacerbated by 5G. First thing I did was I watched for the characteristics of the flu, and it became evident from the very beginning that it's very, very dangerous for older people, and for people who have have health conditions that might be disturbed by it. So, first of all, the logical thing, which is what they've been doing in Sweden, is for elders to pretty much isolate themselves. And then we also have to start facing the fact that nursing homes and elder care facilities need a complete revolution and change at this point. We're getting all kinds of lessons about the way we're treating older people, which I think is extremely important. And Guru Jagat, that also involves the issue of forcing people to stay alive. Like, I picked up an article the other day that said that 97.5% of the people who get intubated, that is, they put that tube in their lung, 97.5% of them die. And so we're taking people who are on the verge of death, ready to pass into a higher frequency, not able to be with their relatives, and we're intubating them. And I think there's some serious issues for society to face about how we're dealing with our elders and our parents and grandparents. There's a real issue here.
And isn't this really very, I would say, Uranus and Taurus, just around like all of our values and our priorities as a human race, that this is part of what's now a reckoning in some way? I mean, how would you describe that?
Well, first of all, going back to what I just said a minute ago, there's the issue of just facing mortality. I'm sure you're not afraid of death. I can't even imagine fearing death. Yeah. I can imagine fearing somebody putting me in a green bag and intubating me. That I can imagine being concerned about.
Right.
But, right. But we're up against a wall at this point. And it is interesting. Carl Kalaman did a pretty good job of showing that we are facing the collapse of Western civilization, which I believe is the case, according to the Mayan calendar. I agree with him. But I'm not afraid of that. Societies collapse. They collapse because of earthquakes or wars or often pandemics. And then what happens is new things are created. And so I think we need to start taking a very critical look at where our fear is going, which I think, by the way, I think this issue of these Jupiter-Pluto transits have a lot to do with getting more clear about where our fear lies and facing it and processing it and going beyond it to another level. And Jupiter, rules well-being and a sense of comfort, and it also has a lot to do with money. And then Pluto rules the deepest levels of transformation. And so we're in the middle during this spring and summer of a process of really starting to face up to what is the basis of our sense of well-being. Like around this period in early April, I think if people look back to early April and they take a serious look at what do they think about their sense of well-being, how did they get challenged financially, and how are they being challenged financially by the economy shutting down? How are they holding their family together and dealing with home schooling, and what does that mean about their sense of well-being? Because the way these transits work is there's usually three of them. And in this case, there are three. The first one, April. The next one's June 30th of this summer. And the last one's November 12th of this year. And if you can get a sense of what you learned during the first pass of it, which is early April, then what can happen is your understanding can deepen with that second transit. And then you could come to a profound awakening and awareness with the third one in November. And if it's true that we are in the middle of a collapse of Western civilization, which means being able to fly all over the place in airplanes, all the wonderful things that we've been able to do for so long, if that is true, this deep immersion into our own abilities and own knowledge and own sense of how to live is just going to become critically important.
No, I do think one of the things when we're looking at kind of parallel time and what this all kind of is what's possible is I was reading a Buckminster Fuller quote this morning just around, I'm going to hack it right now because I don't have it in front of me, but that basically we can build a new society on top of the old crumbling systems that don't work, and that can happen simultaneously. And I do feel like that is happening simultaneously.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, when I've been forced into social distancing, which really makes me mad, but it's okay. We're like Miss Brooks. We do what we're supposed to do, and we're polite.
Yeah.
But what I've done is I've said to the person who's 6 feet away from me and said, well, what have you been doing that's different since this whole thing started? And boy, did I get gardening often. And so people are going back to that sense that there may be food shortages, which I think there will be. I think they're coming very soon in the meat industry, probably. And people are returning to that sense of, okay, well, what can I do? And once they turn to that, they're actually surprised to see that there's a whole lot they can do. In fact, another thing that people are saying to me is, well, I could do without my job at this point now when I found out what it's like to not have to work all day. And that's going to certainly create some things in this economy. If a lot of people just go, it's not worth it, I'm going to do something creative instead of go down and do whatever that was,
Absolutely.
And so those other ways of dealing with it are definitely, they're emerging just as if almost like fecund, wonderful creative ideas that have been dormant for years and years. Like at our house, we live on a little island in British Columbia, and it's kind of remote here. And we have frogs this spring, and I haven't heard the frogs singing to the stars, which is what my grandfather always said the frogs were doing. I haven't heard them for years. And have you noticed that nature, that different aspects of nature seem to be regenerating?
It's pretty. What I think is phenomenal about watching the regeneration is how fast it is, and I do feel like even the most numb among us. I mean, people are noticing that nature is rejuvenating and quickly, and that I think is going to be quite a cataclysmic turn in terms of our ideas around geopolitics and what people feel like they can do to turn around the kind of crises on planet Earth around this stuff.
Yeah. And as we talked about in the last show, we can see astrologically again, we have come to the end of going fast forward for hundreds of years in science and in industrialization. We've just come to the end, and it shows up with the trigon cycle, this Jupiter conjunct Saturn that's coming in December. And what's happening is we're like, just for example, take the health system. Now, you and I probably always knew that the health system was a disaster in the United States, but now the public knows. And people have an amazing ability to just kind of not look or not notice, or if they do notice something, you just go, forget it. Nobody can forget it now. It's right in their faces, And we have to face up to these things. Countries need effective health systems.
Yeah, and I do feel like there's kind of that renaissance. I think there's going to, these are just my predictions, curious what you think. I think there's going to be a de-urbanization as people start to realize that they don't necessarily need to live in urban centers, and maybe some of the reasons why they're living there are no longer relevant. There's going to be, there's already been a back to the earth kind of movement, but I think it's going to get bigger in this time.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think it also might be faster than you and I can imagine.
Yeah.
Because number one, a whole lot of people won't be able to pay the high rent anymore.
Yep.
They'll have to move out, and so they will. Yep. And then the other issue is 5G. Yeah. Because if enough people wake up and realize how the intense frequencies are affecting them, they're going to get away from that if they can. And so I think, so then you project it forward and you say, well, what would that look like? Well, we'll probably see a resurgence of culture in small towns. We'll probably see rural areas and small towns starting to regenerate. And then what will happen, of course, is people won't have to drive as much. And one of the most amazing things about the regeneration of nature that I've been observing is just the sky. The sky has been so much more clear when the planes aren't constantly flying and the cars aren't driving all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah. And I travel 250 days a year. And so I'm always kind of watching cultural and familial mores in different cultures. But one thing that I do feel like it is, as far as in North, particularly America and possibly Canada, the kind of return to a certain type of family value, or let's call it a reprioritization of family values. I think this is also an interesting part of what's happening.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I'm seeing such interesting things coming forth with parents needing to homeschool their children. Because they just lost complete touch with what was going on when they were educating their children. And I'm sort of applying this to the generation that's younger than me, people who are in their 20s through 40s and 50s. Yeah. And because my generation, at this point I'm 77, we were quite in touch with our children's education. There was still a fairly good flow between the school and home. And then once computerization came in and once society started going faster, parents just kind of lost touch with what was going on in that school. And suddenly what's happening is they're being forced to take a look at what's going on. And there's going to be huge changes coming from that alone.
Yeah, I'm very interested in the education of the future, how to educate these new souls and these kind of very sophisticated souls. groups that are, in these younger groups of generations. And I mean, this has been kind of a mission of ours for a long time, but I think that this homeschooling thing is going to become, people are going to realize that they can just, gather with 10 other parents who are like-minded, and basically they have a school.
Yeah. And of course, that's the way it was until maybe 1860, 1870 or something like that. Now, parents were responsible, and wealthy parents got tutors, and some, of course, families were illiterate, but many working class and middle class families were literate, and they educated their children themselves. And I've always felt that we really lost a lot when the public health system, school systems got started. I've always felt that. And I just think it's all going to transform.
Yeah, and the difference being, I mean, this is also Uranus, the difference being that now we have this massive computerization of the planet and the technology to have this kind of, at the touch of a button, all knowledge, basically. Not wisdom, but knowledge. So I think that's also, I do think that even with all of this happening, there's going to continue to be an advancement with the technological age simultaneously.
So let's go right to the harder part of this.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, the plan is to have those children all be educated by artificial intelligence.
Right.
And the plan is for us to have driverless cars and so on and so forth. We don't have to go to the details. And this is a very, very developed and powerful plan on the part of some of the wealthiest people on the planet. We're talking about the 1%, trillionaires and all that. They've been planning this one for a long time because they plan on keeping their power. And unfortunately, that's just a human characteristic that I've always hoped someday would change. But there it is. It's right in your face. And so the problem that they have at this point, sometimes you get to the point where you just start laughing because it's a cosmic joke. Yeah. Because as you know, what actually goes on in our reality is all a creation of our collective thoughts. We all understand that.
Yeah.
And I think they really blew it by keeping people at home and giving them a chance to think.
Yep.
That's what I've been noticing the most.
I agree with you 1,000%. I think that especially as this continues to deepen and develop, and people are waking up in different ways than they ever have because of the pressure of the circumstances. I think they didn't read the X factor was, as it always is, the awakening of human consciousness, and that I think is quickening in some way. I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, one of the things that I think about a lot is Carl Kalaman's work, and I even wrote a book about Carl's work called The Mind Code. I really do think Carl's one of the great geniuses of our time. And what happened in terms of the Mayan calendar is we had a series of time accelerations, and each one of them went faster and faster. Like there was a 5,000-year wave of development of history that goes back to like 3000 BC. And then there was a speed up in time with the Industrial Revolution that basically, according to the calendar, started in 1755. And then we come up to the next time acceleration, which is what's relevant to what you just said. And it started in early January 1999. And it's in the Mayan calendar tradition, it's called the seventh wave or the galactic underworld.
Yeah.
And what happened with that particular time, have you ever talked to Carl, by the way?
I have not, but I would like to. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm going to try to make sure that happens because his latest book is really a quantum leap for him and for everybody else. Because if you think of the issue of the quantum and quantum fields and all of the development of technology, what we have done scientifically is we primarily developed the microquantum, the atoms and all that stuff. And Carl has finally, he's the first person who's done it, has defined the macroquantum. And so this is a significant step forward, and I'll see if I can connect the two of you up. But
amazing.
Back to the galactic underworld. what happened with the galactic underworld for maybe 80% of the people on the planet, at that time, if you go back to 1999, all these people were on the planet who were 10 years old to 8 years old or whatever. And when that particular time acceleration happened, only part of the population seems to have gone with it. And what we see with that part of the population is super techies and web designers and Bill Gates. And what we see is the high-tech, fast acceleration that happened in 1999. And what seems to have happened with that, and I've been observing it because when it started in early 1999, that the speed up, the technological speed up, I'm not going there. And I didn't. I don't have a cell phone. I don't have any of that stuff. I never went there. So I'm one of those people who didn't do it.
Right.
But that gave me a chance to watch all of the people who are doing it. And I think what happened here, Guru Jagat, I think that the people who ran with the ball, kind of a football type image, I think they went way, way too fast, and they weren't watching for who was hanging around ready to tackle them.
Interesting.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, 1999 is when my teacher Yogi Bhajan talks that's basically the beginning of the cusp of the Aquarian Age. Is that was what, in terms of the yogic scriptures, that shift. Yeah.
Yeah, all of this is involved with the shift into Aquarius, the Aquarian Age, which is one of the things that I want to discuss the most today. Actually, this issue of this trigon in December. But back to the speed up, we had this radical speed up. Then we had another speed up in 2011, the final one, called the ninth wave, which was a speed up into enlightenment. And needless to say, many, many less people made that one.
Right.
And what's happening is they're working on it. You know, they're working on it. So what we have here is we have this factor of this shattering and lots of people being left behind. But those people are humans with a soul, and they're turning back on. And I have a feeling that they are ultimately very, very much the majority. And they are the ones who are going to push for bioregionalism, a return to getting away from urban living, a repair of so many things that are wrong in our society, like excessive militarism, and lousy healthcare, and all that. And that majority is going to force the minority who understand all this stuff, they're going to force them to make it safe. Because the one thing that's not fair is to not only create something that's not safe, but then perpetuate it and keep it going and intensify it, which is what's happening right now with that group of people, the galactic underworld techies, shall we say.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they just want to run and play. But the Mayan calendar ended, and what happened with the end of the Mayan calendar? Well, what happened is basically, according to Kalaman, 16 billion years of evolution went into another phase. In other words, it completed itself in 2011, 2012. And I think that's true. And I think that everybody is sitting there in their body, in their place, contemplating what to do and where to go with this. And I think the trigon coming up in December actually gives us a sense of how this is going to work. And because this astrology has been so predictive, I know, by the way, Guru Jagat, I normally don't use astrology this much, even though I'm an astrologer. I don't normally observe. I used to just read natal charts and help people, you know. And I normally don't, look at the whole societal, global realm with astrology as much as this. But because it's so predictive right now, you just can't resist taking a serious look at it, because otherwise it's I think it's very difficult to get a sense of direction. And so if we go to this it's called a trigon. Every 20 years, Jupiter conjuncts Saturn. And Jupiter is the principle of expansion, creative and financial expansion, and societal expansion. And then Saturn is the principle of constriction. And they go through a whole dance over 20 years of expanding and then constricting, just the usual things that we observe. And then every 20 years they come together and a new cycle starts. And this cycle is known to be very, very influential politically and in society. But this particular trigon really stands out like something I've never seen before. I tried to find something like it over the last 12 to 20,000 years with my computer, and I finally gave up. Because here's what happens with this trigon. Now, first of all, Jupiter and Saturn come together in the sky and conjunct December 21st, 2020, at 0 degrees Aquarius.
Wow.
Well, needless to say, yeah, I know. Needless to say, for those of us who have been birthing, I mean, I literally have been birthing the age of Aquarius through my body. I'm an Aquarian. My husband's an Aquarian. I notice you have a great Aquarian group that you're working with
Yes.
your community.
Yeah.
And so when you see that it's 0 degrees of Aquarius, you go, oh my God, this has got to be a message, right? So I've been sitting with that as a message for a long time. But then when I cast the chart again to have a look at it, because I was following astrology so closely, I noticed that the trigon, the Jupiter conjunct Saturn, occurs a few hours after the winter solstice.
Wow.
Now the winter solstice is the entry of the sun into Capricorn.
Right.
And in advanced spiritual traditions, the solstices and equinoxes are really a major deal. Like it's a major part of my own teaching. And when I was a ceremonial teacher, I did a lot of work with equinoxes and solstices.
Yeah.
And basically, what goes on with them is the beginning of the year is not New Year's. It's not January 1st. The beginning of the year is the spring equinox. And just by throwing that timing off right there, Western society, Christian society, has really screwed people up because people need to begin the year at the equinox. So at the equinox, we need to go deeply into what we want to create during that particular year and write it down and keep track of it. Then during the summer solstice, the things that we're creating deepen and become a much deeper part of the fabric of our reality. Then with the fall equinox, we need to balance the things that we're creating with our own world within the larger world. And then when we come into the winter solstice, guess what happens then? Deep contemplation. The winter solstice is the deepest and most intense moment of the year. And notice it's Capricorn again, 0 degrees Capricorn. And that's when we need to go into deep contemplation about how what we create fits into the universe itself. And so the fact that this trigon, Jupiter conjunct Saturn, is 0 Aquarius, and again, I went back 12 to 20,000 years with my computer to try to find another trigon that occurred right at the solstice. Couldn't find it, period.
Wow.
This is really something. If there's any doubt that we're in the middle of a profound reset in human evolution, this takes it away.
And I do feel I agree with you in terms of just using every cosmological language we have to be able to kind of create meaning, because we're humans, we're meaning makers, and it's such it seems that this is very, I always say cosmological languages are the language of the age of Aquarius, but so 0 degrees Aquarius, anything around that in terms of the things that we're dealing with the themes of technology and the dark side of technology, and then also the advancement and the positive parts of technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's as you know, I'm writing a trilogy, and the trilogy covers 2011 through 2020, and I decided to do that back in 2010 because I could see how critical this moment in time was going to be. And having been lucky enough to work with Carl Kalaman as I have, I realized somebody needs to document this, So I decided to create a trilogy with characters who are living through 2011 through 2020. And of course, at this point, the first two books are out, and the third one's coming out, and next year or something like that. I'm in the middle of the third book right now, which is putting me deeply into what might be going on here. So naturally, my characters are reflecting and discussing what the meaning of Aquarius is. They're busy talking about the dark side of Aquarius and the positive side of Aquarius. And that's a process that, we're going to experience over a period of 2,000 years now. We're just going into the early stages of it. But what we do notice regarding the astrology is that this is just a little key that's right in this chart. Jupiter conjunct Saturn in the 0 Aquarius, and that's after, I don't have any data here, but 250 years we had trigons in Earth. In other words, every 20 years we would have Jupiter conjunct Saturn in either Capricorn or Virgo or Taurus. Mm-hmm. But now, with this trigon, we go into 250 years of air, where we're going to get Gemini, Aquarius, and Libra. They're going to roll around. And what does that tell us? Well, that tells us immediately that we are going into a field now which is much more dominated by thought and ideas than by material reality, material creation, doesn't it? It just pops right out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had read somewhere that you said that these Jupiter and Saturn conjunctions, these trigons, they really have been used for time immemorial to get power, to maintain power, and to basically re-emphasize or rejuvenate the empire, quote unquote, of whatever power structure that is. I read something that you wrote about this. Can you explain this to our listeners? I think it's an interesting piece of history.
Yeah, the reason that worked that way, and this, by the way, this one goes back thousands of years. The Roman Empire was structured on trigons for 900 years. Wow. That's the reason that the Roman Empire, I wish I had a book that covered that, and I can't find it, and boy, I'd give anything to get a hold of that book again. Because what they did was they just simply made a new plan. Instead of doing like a 5-year economic plan, they would do a plan every 20 years. And the reason for that is Jupiter rules fortune, money, and well-being, and expansion. And then Saturn rules the structures of our reality. So if you're going to use trigons intentionally, you're going to attempt to structure your reality according to the qualities of Jupiter for that trigon. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You're going to try to create things that'll do that. And if we were an enlightened society at this point and using astrology, we would be attempting, well, first of all, focus number one. Technology and all the things that Aquarius loves, it's not going to work if it's not safe. Period.
Right.
And Aquarius is famous for just create and all that. Well, wonderful, I'm an Aquarian too. But Saturn is there saying, wait a minute, you've got to structure this and it has to be safe. So I do think that we can probably look forward to a lot of work in this area.
I mean, I think that's exciting. I'm a Saturnic person myself. I'm a Jupiter Saturn person. I have them both very significant. And I do think it's exciting to have Saturn there in Aquarius because I think it is going to provide something that has been not, in this early kind of Aquarian, just little step into the Aquarian age. I think the ethos and the real kind of long vision around our relationship with technology has not been there.
Yeah, I agree. And then there's so many things we could say about this, but we're kind of talking about the general influence, Jupiter conjunct Saturn in Aquarius. And okay, let's go back to solstice for a minute.
Yeah.
Now, for me with the solstice, it's so intense that I go into deep contemplation 3 days before, all the way through the solstice, and 3 days after. Every year, it's the one time of the year where I just create that no matter what. It's never perfect. I'm a wife, and I've got 4 kids, and I had a job and all that stuff. In other words, it's not any easier for me than it is for anybody else. But even if I could just get a half an hour in the early morning or something to tune into that, the energy at that time of the year is just like so cosmic and so tuned into the universe itself. And so therefore we know, because this trigon is occurring at that point, that what it looks like is a literal universal spiritual awakening. You can't look at it any other way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do.
But
I do.
there's the other. Go ahead and say what you're going to say. Then, yeah.
Oh, I'm nodding my head and smiling because it's very much a part of our yogic traditions. These equinoxes and solstices.
You can really feel that, and I can feel that one too.
Yeah.
However, using astrology correctly, we have to look at what the chart actually tells us, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things we always look for in a chart is, okay, this is the basic energy that seems to be manifesting in this chart. How is it going to happen? Well, you might not get much information on that, but in this chart, you get major information. And at the exact time of the trigon, on the day of the winter solstice, Pluto is square Mars Eris.
Wow.
And what that is telling us, it's an aspect that no astrologer could possibly ignore. It's telling us that the way that this change is going to occur is through revolution. Now, that isn't necessarily a negative thing. I mean, sometimes the only way something can change is through revolution.
Yep.
But I think this is a distinct, I would say, I'll use the word warning. I don't use astrology in negative ways at all. I'm just always looking for what's the positive potential. And the positive potential of this one is your household should be well-stocked and well-organized. Your friendships and family should be tight. And you should be really having your reality serving you in a very, very positive way during a time like this. Because if there is a revolution, especially in the United States, with all of the arming of the public, it's not going to be very pleasant.
Yeah. I also, this Mars, this Pluto square Mars, and with Mars being in Aries, I heard that right, correct? Mars being in Aries?
Yeah, right.
This is we're dealing with a level of revolution that I think these younger generations have not seen, but at the same time, it may not be just like this particular coronavirus situation we're in right now in the lockdown. I mean, this is wartime, and I think that the revolution. This is a different type of war than ever has happened. But I also think the revolution will be a different type of revolution than ever has happened. If you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think that, as I said before, I think that the economic destruction that's going on is much more serious at this moment than the coronavirus. And so if we look forward to this moment in time in December, and we look at the number of people who have lost their jobs and the segments of the economy that have been destroyed, another thing I think that we should be looking at, those of us who can see what's probably coming, we really need to look at being in a position to assist others as much as possible.
Yes.
Now, there's only so much that anybody's going to be able to do, but we need to be in a strong position to be there for people, our inner circle, our family and friends, and also our society as a whole, because this is going to be very, very, I think, extremely difficult. It's amazing to look at it, isn't it? To look at an aspect like this right after a presidential election, given the qualities of what's going on with this administration.
Yes, it's rich. It's fertile in all sorts of ways. These, and also that this, the third Jupiter Pluto is right after the election, that November 12th.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I hear you. I think it's going to be, but part of what's happened kind of, in, you could call it these different timelines, or you describe it, in terms of the timelines of the Mayans, or any kind of parallel timelines happening. There has been, sleep. There's been sleepers and a massive amount of numbness on the planet. So you could also see this as a real kind of awakening into, waking up as humans on the planet, and that there's not many, the choice to be asleep is not going to be as,
Yeah.
yeah.
You're not going to be able to, And you very astutely went right to that third Jupiter conjunct Pluto, because of course it occurs November 12th,
Yeah.
and then we come up on the 21st of December, which is like 6 weeks or whatever. We go through an election, we come up. That period of time, I think, from that third Jupiter conjunct Pluto up to the winter solstice and the trigon, is going to be, I would say, the most formative 6 weeks that I will have ever seen and will ever see in this lifetime, and probably in many lifetimes. Because, as I said earlier, with the first Jupiter conjunct Pluto, which was April 4th, that's when we see what the central issue is, which in my case I'm saying that I think people are waking up and realizing that the economy is being destroyed. So I think that's the critical issue.
Yeah.
Then it's going to deepen in the summer. But then when we come to that third conjunction, November 12th, that's when, if we've been doing our homework and mastering our reality. Now, during the summer, let's look at the summer for a second, May, June, July, August, September, October, all of the planets are back in Capricorn again. Saturn even goes back and retrogrades back into Capricorn for a little while this summer.
Yeah.
And I noticed, I don't know whether you noticed or not, but when Saturn went into Aquarius, which was, I'm trying to remember, it was the spring equinox this year.
Yes.
March 21st. Yeah, I noticed a distinctive lightning. I noticed that a lot of free-floating, confusing things started to clarify. As you know, I've been noticing that since Saturn's been in Aquarius.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And then it retrogrades back, and as you know, it goes back into Capricorn. So this summer is going to be like just an annealing often, almost like a crunch of all of the stuff that we've been like struggling with in 2019 and 2020. The summer is just going to focalize all that stuff. And so therefore, I love Saturn, by the way. Most people would not say that they love Saturn, but I love Saturn.
Me too.
Because Saturn is discipline,
Yeah.
and Saturn is structure, and Saturn is formation, and it's an energy that you can use if you intend to use it.
Yep.
And so you could say, that all these people who are asleep, they're just not using Saturn. Well, guess what? That's over with this summer. We're going to see people. We're going to see people that we thought were going to be nowhere forever. All of a sudden, they're going to amaze us. Actually, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, and then in the middle of that, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I love that way of looking at it, because I just think it's so important. And I think it goes back to like the elders and the elders of our culture, and how we treat them. And because that's all Saturnic, I think like the wisdom and the longevity of our society is, it's requiring us to pay to play, which is very Saturnic.
And that brings up a big one right away. To fight against our elders being drugged and put to sleep just when we need their wisdom.
Yeah.
Or putting them away in nursing homes. This is a profound wake-up call about that issue, coronaviruses. That's why I think it's so interesting the way this particular virus works. And then another issue is it goes after the lungs. Well, people can't breathe because of the quality of the air. And that's been so dramatic. What's been so dramatic is once the juice got turned off, to see the pictures of the air quality over China and different, Indonesia, different areas of the planet, to see the air clearing. Well, guess what? There's a whole bunch of people who are breathing that clear air and going, wait a minute.
Yep. It
is amazing how it works.
It's amazing. What degree, do you know what degree Saturn retrogrades to? I haven't looked this up yet. I'm curious.
Yeah, I don't know if I wrote anything back.
Okay.
It goes back into, I've got something down here, July 1st, 2020, it's back into Aquarius again. So therefore, it's going to be out of Aquarius during like March, April, May, something like that. But I didn't write that stuff down.
Okay.
I don't have that right here. Yeah, but people can watch for that.
Yeah.
But it was encouraging to see how things seemed to pick up when Saturn did go into Aquarius, and of course it's still going to be there for a while. I think it's in Aquarius until like I don't know either. I don't have it here.
No, I haven't looked at it either.
Yeah.
I'll just as a note of positivity, I've had the Pluto square my Mars, not Mars and Aries, but Pluto square Mars for a good almost 2 years here, and note of positivity about that transit. Not that Mars and Aries is a little bit different, but it is. I mean, it is very revelatory if we allow it to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for people who have planets, Pluto and different planets, who have planets in Capricorn from like 20 degrees to 25, 28 degrees are really going through a lot now.
Yeah.
Mine, I have Mars and what else is in Aquarius? Mercury, but they're earlier degrees. So I've got to tell you, I couldn't believe the power of Pluto in the Capricorn transits when they hit me. For me, it was a few years ago.
It's real. It's been very deep. Yeah. So what are some things, I mean, what other things do you feel like people need to know in terms of preparation, or where they should be, putting their attention, anything around that?
Yeah, I think that what people need right now, unless they're rich and free and could do anything they want, which are very few of us, people really need to deal with their material reality right now. They need to deal with their basic finances, their basic housing, basic food supply, and basic community structures. Because with what's coming, it's just the only thing that we can do at this point. Because the strength of each individual is going to count so much during a time of rapid change like this.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much the individual counts at a moment like this. Each one of us is such a huge factor. I can't even emphasize it enough.
Yeah, it is. It's very true. And, our resources, I think it's when you deal with the 3D resources intelligently, which sounds, simple, but I mean, I can't believe how many people are, if something happened, even now, they don't have resources enough to survive for even a week. I mean, it's pretty crazy.
And you don't have to do that. I've had different stages of my life. I've been poor. I know what it's like to have nothing. I never allowed my life to be like that.
Yeah.
You just can't do it. You just have to do without and not allow that to be the state that you're living in. And so therefore, this is where it's going to be so important for people to be in community. And for example, you guys, your whole group, you're really working together, and you're going to do very well during a time like this. You're going to be a shining example, I think, of how to do well in a moment like this.
Well, I think the resources of this, spiritual spring are obviously very important to be able to be stable in your mental and psychological and emotional states, as well as, all of that is a resource for others.
Yeah. And that's where this period of time is just so interesting. I never would have imagined that the global elite, so-called, the powers that be, would figure out a way to get everybody to stay home alone. I just never imagined.
I know.
I think this is going to be very funny from one point of view before it's over with.
Yeah, no, I think it's an odd, and definitely there's that kind of circulating in the zeitgeist around, and also there are different factions coming out, and have you seen that image in Israel of that social distance? A bunch of activists came out 6 feet away from each other and were basically calling out the government around how they're dealing with this and what's really going on. But it was a pretty profound photo.
Yeah. And I think it's so interesting the way Sweden is coming up at this point. Where Sweden, and I love Sweden, I've taught there a lot, and I know that country, and they just said, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do it this way. They've got their own form of getting people not to be in contagious situations too much. But it's so interesting to watch, and I hope people are watching what different countries are doing, because I think there's so many lessons in that one, big ones.
Speaking, this is a total sideline, but I thought it was an odd piece of news, which is that in all of this and these transits and everything, that supposedly the Supreme Leader Kim Jong of North Korea has died or is incapacitated. Did you see anything on this yesterday?
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't feel like I knew what was going on yet, but I do think it's interesting because I can name another person who's incapacitated right now. His name is Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's so interesting because I feel compassion and pain for him just like any other human being.
Yeah.
And as long as he could go out to his rallies and get everybody to cheer him on, he was doing fine.
Right.
But then what happened was the coronavirus made it impossible for people to go to the rallies anymore. So he lost his cheering squad.
Yeah.
So then he created another cheering squad where he was just going to get up there and blow off for an hour or two about his latest wisdom. And he's made an utter fool out of himself. He doesn't know what he's talking about, and he's not concentrating on the people and the country and the things that the country needs. He's just simply looking for a way to amuse himself. I've never seen such profound expressions of total boredom in anyone's demeanor as I do with Donald Trump. He's profoundly bored. He's a genius from one point of view.
He is.
And he just doesn't know what to do with himself. He's just, And so we've got Kim Jong-un and Trump basically bagging out simultaneously, which is interesting. Because they tried to be buddies in the beginning.
Yeah, no, and then you see a lot of these leaders who, and I know this isn't gender specific, but in terms of they have, I've seen some articles talking about the countries that are run by women are doing much better in this crisis, and just much more logical, much more the economies aren't being, Sweden is I think Sweden is run by a woman, or maybe it's another Northern European country that I'm thinking of, but that they're just in comparison, I think this is very Pluto and Capricorn in my opinion. Just the kind of the changing of leadership and what that looks like and how it has to happen now.
It's just such a fascinating moment in time. And I think the more each one of us can look at it that way, we're going to just start to see things that are just astonishing. And I mentioned to you at the beginning when I first got on the phone that I got a little bit bummed out yesterday, which is kind of unusual for me.
Yeah.
And I think I got bummed out yesterday because I went out and sat in the trees. And while I was sitting in the trees, I got this profound awareness of how lonely they are, because humans have withdrawn their contact to such a degree. It was like realizing that somebody you knew your whole life was lonely and never really spoke to you. It was a really profound awareness of the loneliness of nature and the longing for us to become involved and connected with her again.
Wow. Wow, that's so beautiful. Thank you so much for all of your wisdom, and thank you for sharing your very deep revelations with us. And I agree with you. The more we can find some perspective to watch and also participate in this grand moment in the Earth's history and human history, I think it gives energy and meaning to these very challenging times.
Yeah, and we're really lucky to be here at this moment in time, and I'm also really fortunate to have connected with you. I really, really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.
I feel the same way. Thank you so much, and sending all our love to you and your amazing family and your work, and can't wait to check back in with you later this year.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Reality Riffing. These are conversations that I think are important with people who are doing great things in the world about subject matters that need to be discussed. If you enjoyed the content, the conversation, please feel free to share with your people, share with your friends and family, rate the podcast below, and also subscribe.